Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. We love to take a look at all the exciting stuff happening in the NFL, and especially right now as we're getting down to the wire here. And one of the most exciting things, of course, every year is the race for MVP. So today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the NFL MVP race. Um, and what's so interesting is we have a recent article here that kind of goes beyond just, the top contenders, but really tries to dig deeper into why they're ranked the way they are. We're talking about quarterbacks defying expectations, a running back who's shaking things up. It's a lot of twists and turns, and it feels like the playoffs have already started.
Yeah, I think one of the most fascinating things about this MVP race is that it's not just about looking at the stats. It's about seeing how these players perform under pressure and how they adapt to different challenges, and ultimately how their individual brilliance translates into wins for their team.
That's a great point. Speaking of brilliance, we have to start with the current frontrunner, Lamar Jackson.
Making the most of every opportunity.
Hmm. Okay, so I know we can't avoid this any longer. We're talking about the MVP race, which means we got to talk about Patrick Mahomes. I mean, is it even a race without him in the conversation?
Well, it's interesting because even in a season that's been, by his own ridiculously high standards, I guess you could say pedestrian, Mahomes is still absolutely crucial to the Chiefs' success. But he is on pace for a career high in interceptions and a career low in touchdowns.
Do you think that's a sign of decline? Or is it more about, the challenges he's faced this season, like playing without his top two receivers for a big chunk of the year?
It's definitely a combination of factors. I mean, Mahomes is incredibly talented, but even he needs weapons around him to be at his best. Now that he's got DeAndre Hopkins back, it'll be really interesting to see how that impacts his performance. Plus, they've got some potentially easier games coming up against the Panthers and the Raiders.
So could this be the spark that ignites a late season surge for Mahomes? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But now for the real curveball. We have a running back making a legitimate case for MVP. Saquon Barkley has been an absolute force for the Eagles this season, and some people are even saying he deserves to be in the MVP conversation. But let's be real, how often do we actually see a running back win this award? I mean, it feels like we're talking about a totally different era of football, right? A running back in the MVP conversation. It's not exactly a common occurrence.
Yeah, it's definitely rare. Historically, the MVP award has been dominated by quarterbacks. There's this perception that they have a greater impact on the game. They're the ones calling the shots, driving the offense. But Quan Barkley's performance this season is really challenging that notion.
He really is. The article called him a dream addition for the Eagles,
Hmm.
and his stats are insane. Second in total rushing yards, leads the league in average yards per game and 10-plus yard rushes. Plus, he's on pace for a career-high season. What would it take for a running back to actually overcome those historical odds and win MVP?
Well, it's a steep climb, there's no doubt about that. You would need to see a truly exceptional season. A performance that completely redefines what we expect from a running back. I mean, think about the impact a player like Barry Sanders had on the Lions, or what LaDainian Tomlinson did for the Chargers. Those were MVP caliber seasons,
Yeah.
where the running back was undeniably the heart and soul of the team.
So you're saying Book Barkley needs to be not just good, but historically great and lead the Eagles to a dominant season.
Exactly. He needs to be the driving force behind their success, the player that they can't live without. And even then, it might not be enough to sway the voters. There's a certain bias towards quarterbacks that's hard to overcome.
Well, okay, so Barkley's got his work cut out for him. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about some of the challenges these other MVP contenders are facing. Jackson's got those tough defenses and divisional rivals to contend with. Allen is navigating a new offensive system without his top target. And Mahomes needs to figure out how to incorporate Hopkins and cut down on those interceptions. Do you think these challenges are ultimately going to determine who wins the award?
Absolutely. It's not enough to shine in ideal conditions. The true test of an MVP is how they respond to adversity, how they elevate their team when the pressure is on.
Yeah, it's like a real-life pressure cooker, isn't it? Every game, every snap is a chance to prove yourself, to make a statement. So what do you think voters are going to be looking for specifically? What kind of performances will separate the contenders from the pretenders?
Well, I think they'll be looking for moments of leadership. For those clutch plays that turn the tide of a game. They'll want to see quarterbacks making smart decisions under pressure, avoiding those costly mistakes. And in Quan Barkley's case, they'll be looking for those game-changing runs, those moments where he single-handedly puts the team on his back and carries them to victory.
So it's not just about the stats. It's about the impact The narrative, the story that unfolds over the course of the season.
Precisely. It's about those moments that capture the imagination, that make you say, wow, that's an MVP performance.
This deep dive has been incredible, really eye-opening. I think we've gone beyond just listing the top contenders and really dug into the nuances of this MVP race. What are some of the key takeaways that you think our listeners should keep in mind as the season progresses?
Well, I'd say pay attention to how these players perform in those high-stakes games against tough opponents. Look for those moments of leadership, those clutch plays that define a true MVP. And don't underestimate the power of narrative. The stories that emerge. The way these players handle adversity can have a significant impact on how they're perceived by voters.
So we're not just watching a football game. We're watching a drama unfold with twists and turns, heroes and villains, and a whole lot of suspense.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so compelling.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. And I'm sure our listener is eager to hear your final thoughts on what this all means. So much for predictable. This MVP race has thrown us some serious curveballs. And I think you're starting to see why it's so much more than just looking at who has the best stats.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got quarterbacks defying expectations, a running back making history, and a whole lot of questions about what really defines most valuable in a league that's constantly evolving.
It's a great point. Early in the season, it felt like the MVP award was almost a foregone conclusion. Like it was just going to be handed to one of the usual suspects. But now it feels like the game itself is being redefined. Like we're witnessing a shift in how we value different positions and different styles of play.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this season so fascinating. It's forcing us to reconsider those assumptions about the quarterback-centric nature of the NFL. We're seeing the impact a dominant running back can have, how a quarterback can thrive without a star receiver, and how even the most talented players need a strong supporting cast to reach their full potential.
Right, and so for someone who's trying to make sense of all this, what advice would you give them? What should they be paying attention to as the season unfolds?
I would say look beyond the box scores. Pay attention to the nuances of the game, the decisions players make under pressure, the way they lead their teams through adversity. Those are the moments that truly reveal character and value.
So, for example, when Lamar Jackson faces those tough defenses, how does he adapt his game plan? Does he force throws, or does he find creative ways to move the chains? And with Josh Allen, how does he communicate with his receivers now that he doesn't have that go-to guy? Does he trust his offensive line to give him time? Or does he rely on his legs to make plays?
Exactly. It's those subtle adjustments, those split-second decisions that often separate the good from the great. And for Saquon Barkley, how does he respond when the Eagles are down by a touchdown late in the game? Does he shy away from contact? Or does he run with even more intensity, determined to carry his team to victory?
So it sounds like we need to be paying attention to the mental game as much as the physical one, to the strategic battles as much as the highlight reel plays.
Exactly. This MVP race is a chess match. And the most valuable player will be the one who can outsmart, outmaneuver, and outlast the competition.
Well, this deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to discover, even in a game we think we know so well.
And the best part is, the game's not over yet. We still have weeks of football left to play, with twists and turns we can't even imagine.
So to our listener, I say this: stay engaged, keep those questions coming, and enjoy the ride. This MVP race is a wild one, and it's only going to get more intense from here on out.